I want the Yolanda survivors to get back on their feet.
We all have our struggles, whether you're rich or poor.
We wanted to write the Philippine experience of
Our
love.
biggest enemy is apathy.
My country to be an example.
I think I've always been deeply interested in people's stories.
This National Teachers Month, we put the spotlight on Dr. Analyn Ikin Salvador-Amores, Associate Professor in Social Anthropology at University of the Philippines, Baguio. She is the first Filipina to hold master's and doctorate degrees in Social and Cultural Anthropology from Oxford University in the UK. We get an insider's look into Dr. Salvador-Amores' groundbreaking work on indigenous cultures in the Cordillera, her homeland, and her mission to develop more culturally sensitive indigenous education. This year, Dr. Salvador-Amores is a Metrobank Outstanding Teacher awardee. We catch up with her in Baguio as she explains how education is more than the facts we learn in class or the rigorous scholastic training. It's also about translating what we learn into meaningful real-life contexts. Ikin Salvador-Amores, welcome to Profiles.
Thank you.
Wonderful to be here in your hometown of Baguio. And congratulations, you just won the award for one of the most outstanding teachers by the Metrobank Foundation. Tell me, why did you get into the field of anthropology?
Anthropology gives you that extra pair of eyes to look at the people, the culture, their narrative. Growing up in Baguio, this is the melting pot of different indigenous groups coming from different areas in the region. So I was exposed to it. I was with my grandmother. Her name is Lola Guring. She used to sell garlic and onions in the public market, in the old market of Baguio City. And she would always tag me along to sell the onions in the market. So I got exposed to these different people coming from different regions. And then perhaps my curiosity was piqued when I was with her. There were some women who were tattooed coming from the mountain provinces, and I was curious why their skins or their arms were marked. And then I asked where would they come from, no? And then eventually that led to the whole story of tattooing as an area of study in anthropology.
Dr. Analyn Salvador-Amores was recognized in 2014 as an outstanding young scientist in the field of social anthropology by the National Academy of Science and Technology. Her book, Tapping Ink Tattooing Identities, a landmark study on the traditional tattooing practices of Northern Luzon, was awarded the 2014 Elfren S. Cruz Prize for Best Book in the Social Sciences by the National Book Development Board and Manila Critics Circle. You wrote really a landmark book, Tapping Ink Tattooing Identities. Why did you decide to get into this?
Yeah, the Kalinga is one of the most is one of the highly tattooed people in the Cordillera region. No? There are tattooing traditions in the Cordillera. You have Bontoc, you have Ifugao, Kalinga, and also the Tingyans in Abra. All of them are tattooed. But I find the Kalinga tattoos as very exquisite, intricate, because of the symmetry and complexity of designs. And then I was just intending to study the tattoos, but I found that there is an old woman who still performs the art of tattooing in Kalinga. That's how I got interested with the subject of tattooing. I spent my fieldwork in Kalinga for 16 months. At the end of my research, the older women told me, "You should get tattoos, you're part of us." One of the women said, "To become a Butput woman, you have to have this tattoo." I went to Wangod. Of course, I was scared because of the pain undergoing through the process. So initially, I had a test tap on my right arm. She said, "No, you should get the whole arm tattooed." And I said, "No, that's impossible. I might faint throughout the process."
Mama.
But eventually, I consented to get tattooed, and she gave me a beautiful tattoo, a snake pattern. which
And
is part
normally
of the epic.
they choose it for you. You do not
Yeah,
choose the design.
Usually that's the case. Tattoo is a gift from her, and of course, it has its own meanings personally, and of course to the community that I've worked with. This is the tool that Wang Ud uses, using the lemon thorn. She also has another tool with the steel needles, and this is hand tapping also, as well.
Painful.
Yeah. The Kalinga also use a certain kind of stencil, so they dip that in the charcoal ink, put that then there, and then they do the tattooing. In Ifugao, they have more figurative designs. No, it's like a ballpoint pen, so they do hand piercing as well. There are two methods. One is you do hand tapping, and you also do hand piercing. So there are two ways of doing tattooing, and these are the old techniques in tattooing tradition of the Austronesians. The elderly women, men and women there would explain pain, but it's too abstract for me. Like, I would ask them, is the pain similar to childbirth? Is the pain similar to getting wounded? And others, and they told me it's a different pain. So I thought I was just observing what I've seen in the process or the act of tattooing, but getting through the process is a very good learning experience.
And as an
to understand
anthropologist,
the pain. Yes.
that's really what it's about. And that's what you always tell your students, isn't it? You have to do everything through practice.
Yes. In terms of tattooing, there are still areas who are not yet documented, that are not yet documented in the rest of the Philippines. So I would like to, it's my dream to come up with a book that actually chronicles or documents all the tattooing traditions in the Philippines, like in the Visayas or in Mindanao. Hopefully I can do a documentation about that. My current research on tattoos have expanded to Southeast Asia. I've looked at Atayal tattoos in Taiwan, and also the tattoos of the women in Okinawa, Japan. Because Okinawa, Taiwan, and Philippines, most of the tattoo practitioners are all women.
Yeah.
So I'd like to highlight that aspect of culture that is forgotten in the literature.
In fact, you have some of those tools are from those areas,
yes,
right? Some of these.
This is from Taiwan. This is hand tapping, so they do it this way.
Okay.
Okay, and this is like for cleaning out the blood out from the wound. Okay, they also use the hammer, for tattooing.
There's also a lot of misconceptions, and you've written about this, the misrepresentation of indigenous cultures. What do you mean by that?
There's a lot of misrepresentations. Sometimes it's hard to disentangle the colonial labels to the ethnic groups. No? They were labeled as savages. They were labeled as barbaric with the practices. But in fact, for these people, these are the unique and distinct practices in the performance of the rituals to become a person. And sometimes these are misunderstood by non-indigenous or even to the foreign eye. So it's good to represent culture in this rigid form of research.
And there are stereotypes. In one of the anecdotes you cite here, you talked about when you were going on field work to Bontoc, you're about to get on a bus, and an old lady asked you, where are you going? And she was telling it's scary because mga headhunters sila dyan.
So, Kalinga had this notion as headhunters or fierce people, but in fact they are gentle, no? They are very friendly, very hospitable, they protect you, and very generous, no? And of course, what I like about the Kalinga is that they have this rich tattooing tradition, and they also still, until now, they practice the rituals. My work was very well appreciated in Oxford. I added on to the existing perspective of what people already know about the Philippines. It is through Filipino scholars studying at prestigious universities that other people see how beautiful and complex our culture is and worthy of study. Attending to the rigors of the discipline, along with regular conversations with world experts in the field, broadened my understanding further.
Compare this to your experiences in Oxford. I mean, the UK has a fabulous system, of course. What was it like studying there as opposed to what we have here in the Philippines?
Studying in Oxford is, there's nothing to do there but to study because everything's well provided. You have the best facilities, you have up-to-date materials, you have excellent professors, you have excellent support system in the colleges. No? So in fact, Oxford is, my 5 years in Oxford is one of the most memorable experience there. Mm-hmm. And my professors are my critical friends because they give you constructive brutality when it comes to learning and writing your essays. No? It has to meet an argument. It has to be analytical in everything, no? Critical in that manner.
Constructive brutality, I like that. That's something Filipinos don't take criticism too well.
Yeah, they take it too personal, so that's why
yes.
Some things go the other way.
And it's great you decided to come back, to bring it back here to the Philippines.
Yes. How do Igorots or the different ethno-linguistic groups in the Cordillera are represented in the museums? No? So let's try to look at that. And then in the field, you can see the differences of the representation found in the museums and their everyday lifestyle.
What is it that you try to really bring to your students?
Sometimes there are abstract concepts in anthropology that you cannot explain from just using the books alone. So as much as possible, whenever I discuss concepts such as pain or the body or religion in indigenous communities, I tried my best to bring them to the field, come to face with the artisans, the shamans, the tattoo practitioners, and the other cultural bearers, no, for them to experience firsthand what is it that makes them unique, or what's the practice all about. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a greater appreciation when you bring the students to the field, and my mission there really is to have that long-lasting effect about that particular experience.
Isa po siya sa mga pinaka-idol namin na professors namin sa UP Baguio. I think kasi po yung standards niya in teaching, na-uplift niya rin po yung aming performance as students. Makikita niyo po yung passion niya sa pagtuturo, at pag na-enjoy niya yung tinuturo niya, parang nahahawa na rin po kami dun sa enthusiasm niya sa pagtuturo.
So, can you see the
Sa Sokan po kasi, meron kaming tawag sa kanya, siya yung Diyosa ng social anthropology. Based po dun sa background of education niya, sobrang na-overwhelmed din kami kasi nga, shucks, yung teacher mo galing ng Oxford, ganyan. So dapat yung sasagot ko tama, dapat quality din. Hindi po siya isa sa mga pinaka-paborito kong teacher. Siya po yung pinaka-paborito kong teacher.
What do you think of your students today? I mean, of course, the generations now are very different. You also mentioned earlier that anthropology is not exactly the profession that will earn you the money. With your students, what do you see? How is the future looking?
Sometimes culture is undervalued. Sometimes we forget that we have a rich tradition. As much as possible, I try to inculcate the values of research, pride in one's culture, and of course the rigors of research to my students. So if you have a greater appreciation of your culture, then the more that you can get interested in doing some research about them. With the advent of modernity, some of the cultures are actually reinvented and revived, but at the same time you lose meaning and you gain something in terms of the development. For instance, the use of technology, use of gadgets, no? So younger people would rather use your cell phones rather than talking to the elders, going to the cities rather than going back to the community to to plant your rice in the rice fields and all that. The concepts have changed, no? The practices have changed, even their preferences have changed.
What do you think it takes to really be an outstanding teacher? What are you trying to do?
Okay, for me, an outstanding teacher is teaching beyond the classroom. As much as possible, like I said earlier, you have to bring the students to the field to experience what it is and to explain a particular concept with the artisans, with the tattoo practitioners or other cultural bearers. And aside from that, being outstanding is not just about your academic credibilities or credentials, but of course, being selfless. You give your sacrifice, a lot of sacrifice with your time, energy, and even money and all that. No? So it goes together.
So you also talk about an Indigenous education. This is how you try to bring it all back to the people. What do you mean by an Indigenous education?
This is an advocacy that we are trying to present to the Department of Education to be culturally responsive and to be sensitive with Indigenous people's knowledge and system. We hope to indigenize the curriculum by looking at the practices, traditional practices, customary practices in the region, to bring that to the curriculum of the DepEd. Yeah.
Speaking
culturally responsive
Yes.
Indigenous education. So that means training Indigenous teachers to teach the Indigenous children, capacity building for non-Indigenous teachers to teach Indigenous children, etc. And of course, the production of instructional materials based on the Indigenous knowledge systems of this group. No? The most difficult challenge that I encountered in the field is to question you why you are there and studying this group of people. And of course, you have to get consent from them in order to push through with that study. Without the consent, then there's no research. So you have to persuade people that you are not doing this for profit.
Throughout the research, were you explaining this to your children also?
Yes, I bring my 2 children to the field. I have an 11-year-old son. His name is Julian, and my daughter is 16 years old, Justine. So as much as possible, we bring them to the field so they would know what their mother is doing or their father is doing. Justine was with me during the Isinay research. You know, she was also documenting, talking to the elders in the community. So, in fact, in one of the activities in their school, they were required to talk about. It's called the Indigenous Month, no, which happens in October this next month. No? My son said that some teachers doesn't actually know what a mumbaki is. It's not even in the textbook. So one day he came to me and said, "Mom, can I bring my picture, and can I wear the blanket that my friends in Ifugao gave me, and I will act like a mumbaki when I go to school tomorrow."
Are there certain projects or other research work that you'd like to continue or look into? Or perhaps some you're actually doing now?
Yeah, my area of research is actually to focus on endangered cultures, things that are forgotten in literature. Like for instance, I'm working on the Ifugao Mumbaki, how to becoming a Mumbaki. And in that research, I'm looking at women Mumbaki, because there's a Western notion that it's always the male who actually leads the community. But in fact, the women as Mumbaki is well documented in photographs during the colonial period. There was a story about the death of an elderly woman in the village, and she was tattooed. And of course, in that era, you have to wrap the deceased, with the use of blankets. And then I found out that in Ifugao, for instance, there is a blanket that is most sought after by the affluent class, and this is called kinutian, or the Ikat blanket, and these are woven by the Isinay. The Isinay are the best weavers in northern Luzon, in central Luzon, and unfortunately they don't weave the blanket anymore.
Basta dahil tataranan ay
So it traveled to different places. And then also I tried to look at that, this particular blanket. This is the blanket I was referring to. This is actually woven in the mountain province, but in fact, the Isinay trader actually brought it there, no? And so they copied the designs, no? So this is the Ikat blanket. It's actually a funerary blanket where they wrap the dead, no? There's also a male and female blanket, no? So there's a specific owner, no? Every time they make a particular blanket. The last one that was woven by the Isinay is actually in Dupax del Sur, in Nueva Vizcaya. That was woven in 1978. That's the last of the original blankets that the Isinay have.
So this is meant for funeral. This is not meant to be used as a decorative thing, the way people
I saw
often
some
do.
people, they use it as a bed sheet.
Yeah, it's for funeral.
In Manila, when I saw it, oh my goodness.
Because no one really, and that's why we must
so
understand.
we must understand
our-
what these are
Yeah.
for.
And this is a dying culture. That's why you even volunteer with these communities. You go there and help them to
Yes,
also
so
document.
it's good to talk about appearing cultures now rather than disappearing. So I tried my best to document and find materials, archival materials, any photographs about that artifact or about that culture, and bring that to the people. And I hope they could appreciate that by reviving the culture. So in a way, you document, you research, come up with a publication, and hopefully the younger generation could use that in understanding who they are as part of that ethnic group. With Dr. Reed, he's a renowned linguist of Cordillera languages. So part of the language project is to come up with a guide to orthography. So we are preparing the manuscript for that, and hopefully it will encourage other Isinays to relearn the language, most especially for the children in public schools, the younger generation, and even in Isinays in diaspora. So hopefully we can come up with something on the orthography of the Isinay.
Such fascinating research. Thank you for all your work and for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you.